I'm trying to do like a vlog or something. I don't know how well it's going to be, but let's see. So I have shown you this on other socials, but I don't think I gave you my full thought about Vampire Lestat by Anne Rice. I finished this at the beginning of this year, I think. I don't think that I finished in 2025. I think this came with me, yes, till January 2026. And this is the second installment on the Vampire Chronicles by Anne Rice. If you want to know my thoughts or my review, I did the review of the first installment that is called The Interview with the Vampire. I will link the video. So this is the second book. And it's funny because some people that I enjoy accompanying that have read at least the 3 first books of the saga, the Vampire Chronicles, they say they prefer the Interview with the Vampire, and that they would prefer if the author would have continued with Louis instead of Lestat, because one of them said that Louis incarnates, right, the type of vampire that doesn't want to be a vampire and struggles with that reality. And instead Lestat, in this book, I'm sorry, it may be spoilery, this video, so be aware. I will try not to give too much, but I will give something, because otherwise I cannot do a video. So yeah, this book accompanies Lestat after like a hibernation, can we say that? Of course, I'm going to summarize really what had happened and what happens in this one. I'm not going to try to enter in details because I think the fun of reading a saga is discovering the plot, the story, the details by yourself. But in here, Lestat awakens from a hibernation, let's say, and he encounters a group of young people that form a band. What does he do? He kind of discovers through them, because the music attracts him to them, and he through them will be aware that there is a book called Interview with a Vampire that was Louis telling his story. And if you want to know how Louis connects with Lestat, go watch my first video about Interview with a Vampire. So Lestat, what does he do? He convinces these humans that he kind of makes part of the band because he can, and he seduces them, and he will be the vocalist. But what does he do? He writes his own story to be published, so like a response to the Interview with the Vampire. And how does this come about? Because he introduces himself as Lestat, and those young people from the band, oh, there is a book that talks about a vampire called Lestat, and he really, and that's how the story goes. Of course, you have to read it to find the joys of the writing of Anne Rice. But I have to say that I don't agree with some people that mentioned that Lestat wasn't a character that they want to know more about, because along this reading, I fell in love with the character. This book introduces what I already told you, and then it enters in the book being written by Lestat. So he goes almost from the beginning of his life till he being transformed into a vampire, and after that it's wonderful. I mean, there is a scene with wolves that will be so enticing, so in the moment, but at the same time so, I don't know, involving, that you know that will be important for the story. And you may be thinking some things like I did that don't really get to happen, you know, werewolves or something. That's not really the vibe, but you know that scene is important, and you will get it a bit further in the story. But all the characters and other vampires, and a particular vampire called how phenomenal character. I was really intrigued by him and his role and what he does for, what is his mission as a vampire in the world, and how Lestat comes to him, and so on, and the relationship of Lestat with his mother, and is really, really a page turner. At least for me it was. And so now I'm reading the third book in the installment of the saga, Queen of the Damned. I'm on page 78. I'm in the middle of a chapter. And this is quite different from what I was expecting the narrative would be in the third installment. I was taken aback a bit because this has an index, not index, a content page, I think, if I'm not mistaken. Let me just, contents. So I thought that this will begin right at the point that the Vampire Lestat end up, but that is what happens, but not in the way that I was thinking. So Anne Rice is really imaginative in the way that she picked up this book, this continuation, you get different perspectives from different characters that sometimes end up dead right at the beginning, but they give you perspective about a specific moment where the Vampire Lestat ended, and I'm finding fascinating. Well, at the beginning of this one, I was, I think maybe I'm going to stop right here, and I will read this one because I bought it, but maybe I will not continue the series if this is what Anne Rice will do after this. But no, I'm quite enjoying it. And I'm really into the story and the hints that she is right away giving us about other people, other vampires, other myths that she creates in her world, in this world of the Vampire Chronicles. And it's so fascinating. I know this is a story about vampires, and you may be thinking, who cares? But it's so much more, at least if you read it. So if you extrapolate and you extract more from it, it talks about various things through grief, loss, same thing, or almost in some aspects, the myth of the phoenix. Not that she mentions it literally, but in some not I'm with this one in my hand, but I could be with this one. It's the same thing, but it's fascinating. Like it's incredible how a person can have such an imagination to create a plot, but not be the obvious continuation. As I hope I'm not contradicting myself. I know that I said that I was a bit disappointing in the way that this book started and how it was structured, but now I'm finding quite interesting because it is out of the ordinary, out of the obvious, or what you would expect from a continuation. Because the Vampire Lestat, comparing to the interview with the vampire, was a direct response, right? Well, thinking a bit more about it, of course, Queen of the Damned, being the third installment, had to have some judge, something. And Rice gives us that. I don't know how this is going to go from now, but at this point in time, I'm adoring the saga, at least till book 3 and until page 78. Let's see how this goes. And I don't have my mic on again, but just to rectify something that I said previously, I think I said that Vampire Lestat was a direct continuation of the interview with the vampire. Sorry, I don't have the book in my hands right now, I just have these two right now. In truth, Vampire Lestat is not a direct continuation of the interview with the vampire. So, because the interview with the vampire, we end up with the boy that interviews the vampire, Louis, getting into the car, or like traveling away to find Lestat. And in the second installment, we have Lestat in first person telling us about the era that he's in the present of this book, of this installment, the second installment, and his past story, how he became a vampire, and so many stuff that I already told you. But in this one here, Queen of the Damned, in the chapter that I'm in, that is called, let me just check, The Story of Daniel, the Devil's Minion, or The Boy from the Interview with the Vampire. So just in the third installment, in the Queen of the Damned, we are going to have something about that sad boy that we, in the interview with the vampire, didn't know the name, but now we know that he is called Daniel. And Daniel right now is in dwellings with Vampire Armand. And because Armand, well, is for you to have, of course, the whole picture, you will have to read the books. But the boy, in this case Daniel, made a lot of money with the book that he published, Interview with a Vampire. Yes, that is a real book in this series, in the story of this series. As Vampire Lestat is a real book in this series, so is the response of Lestat of the book Interview with a Vampire. You know, that's a lot of ins and outs in this series, in this saga. And what I'm gathering throughout the reading of this chapter, that I'm still in the middle of, is that Daniel is somewhat, well, it says he's the devil's minion. So he's kind of dominated by Vampire Armand. And Armand in the later story of Interview with a Vampire was the vampire that was a companion to Louis after all the stuff that happened between him and Claudia and Lestat. So because Louis was looking for the meaning of being immortal, or their beginnings, you know, their creators in some way, but Armand, at least for my understanding till this point, didn't have that knowledge, but never quite bluntly said that to Louis. And they became a point, they come apart, and they moved on in different directions. That still in the story of Interview with a Vampire. And so, but Armand, before knowing Louis, Armand knew Lestat. That is a whole interesting thing. And something that I have to confirm, I have to come back to Interview with a Vampire, because I got the idea that Armand, I visualized Armand in a certain way, and then in here, in the second installment, Vampire Lestat, he was described as a child. And I don't know if it was a decision from the author to alter the physiognomy of Vampire Armand. I suppose it was, but I will have to confirm this. But yeah, and so just to clarify that, so the Vampire Lestat is a continuation, of course, yes, but it is not direct, as I said before, okay, that it has this in between. And so in here I am on page like 100, yeah, and I'm in the middle of the chapter that I told you, and I'm fascinated by it because Daniel, so the boy of the Interview with a Vampire, earned a lot of money with the publishing of the book, but Armand is the one, as I'm gathering, that is controlling the finances of Daniel. But has Daniel truly in a maze? It's quite complicated, but Daniel is enchanted by Armand, and he wants to become a vampire as well. He wants to become immortal. And this is all, well, because this is passing by before the events before of the events of the Vampire Lestat, because Lestat, as I said before, is in a band and is going to perform in a stadium in California, and the music that he made is all about the secrets of the vampires that supposedly no one should know, and even more so the humans or the mortals, right? But so the Queen of the Damned is kind of picking up a bit before the happenings of the end of the Vampire Lestat, and is kind of building up the story to maybe go somewhere, I suppose. I'm hoping so. But yeah, that's the point I'm in, just to make a check-in. And yeah, see you later. My hair is a mess. Okay, something that is addressed in the third installment of the Vampire Chronicles, The Queen of the Damned, is the origin of vampires, how they came to be. There is a whole plot around it, but that's not what I'm going to talk about specifically. Well, something that I want to come forward and say is that yes, this book is about vampires, of course, but and there will be a lot of plot around events. You know, I don't know if you saw my video about, it was a BuzzFeed questionnaire or something like that. And one of the questions was if you as a reader were more inclined to the plot or to the characters. And I didn't know how to answer that because, as I explained in that video, I'm not a really baggage reader, so I don't really know yet. And something that I found in this book was that this has, in my opinion, quite well, it's storytelling most of the time, but it has a lot of plot, so a lot of events, a lot of things happening. Although it may be someone telling a story or telling the story, it's a lot of um, coming back in time and telling how it was and how it came to be. You know what I mean? So it's a lot of telling. So we've in this book, for a chunk of it, we lost a bit of character development per se, because we are being told the story, you know. And I can say that I think that's not really a spoiler, that the origins come from millennials ago, even so before the birth of Christ and everything are surrounding that, in Egypt, of course, by the story of Anne Rice, but the thing is, and the thing that I'm here for, to do this check-in without giving much about, I'm going to try not to be spoilery, but there are being topics that I was expecting for them to come, and they arrived at a point that, I mean, that I think, well, it turns the story more interesting to me. And that is something about people that rule the land, and something about witches, and some things about people with supernatural powers or capabilities. And if you know something about a bit of history about Egypt, you know that they had their whole system about believing in certain gods, a belief system as any other, but in here it that is questioned, or yes, that is questioned. Of course, we you have here the supernatural, as I was explaining to you, but there's here a character that is going to be like, she has power because she's like a queen in her time, um, or what we could call a queen, a ruler, shall we say. uh, and she hears about certain capabilities of certain people, and she meanders a scheme to take them to her, and they will like explain to her that everything that she believes in basically is sort of invented by men. What she believes, or her people and herself believes, and the gods and so on, has maybe origin on something supernatural, yes, but on something that actually exists, but it's not as she thinks it is. Like, so they talk here about spirits and how they surround Earth and go around people, and um, they are able to, make the breeze come through and so on. You know what I mean? Supernatural stuff. And these um, people with those type of capabilities, so the witches, will tell her that they don't do it because they have some sort of, there's not an ulterior motive or a profound motive for it. The spirits just do it because they are fond of it, in meaning that they enjoy seeing people worshipping things that they do, or they enjoy the chants that they sing, or they enjoy the rituals, like for like they have some sort of personality, but it not it it is it is talked about in here about good spirits and evil spirits, but you know the gods as they know it, her people and herself know, don't exist as they think. Of course, we could make this kind of supposition or make hypotheses in terms of dialogue and hypotheses with any religion, even nowadays. And that is what I found so interesting, that the belief system of this person is being put on stand with herself, uh, because she's been shown You have, of course, you have to suspend your belief. Suspend your belief. I think that's the term. But if you put yourself in her shoes, and if you are being given this type of information, and you are seeing stuff happening, because stuff will happen in real time, like things will appear of nowhere, coming from some place that she knows is far away, for instance a necklace or so, or for instance, like poof, you know so she will be shown stuff, this person, and or this character, but still her her belief system is so ingrained, or her capability of understanding what she's being proven in a way is so, maybe so much more that she can handle, that she will refuse to accept it and to believe it, or to stop believing what she did, what she believed before, and accommodating this new idea and this new information. And even from the witches, they will say something like, oh yeah, so for instance, of course this type of questions will come up, right? What do you know of the life after, for instance? Or where are the souls of the dead? And the answer will be, they don't know, they being the spirits. And what comes up of it? Horror, fear. And then her mind began to work, to do what it had always done, find some ground system to explain away what caused pain, some grand way to accommodate what she saw before her. The dark secret inside her was becoming larger. It was threatening to consume her from within. She could not let such a thing happen. She had to go on. So, this is like a really interesting premise to me. Okay, I'm speaking for myself, and I think what's fascinating about this type of um, authors, maybe, or because of course this, if you see for the superficial and you hear someone say, oh, it's all about vampires, you may, well, yeah, okay, yeah. But when the author develops this type of questionings and dialogues and setups in her story, in her narrative, it becomes so much more interesting, because, as you know, I'm fascinated by these things: system of beliefs, religion, um, faith, everything surrounding that. For me, it's very interesting and I'm very curious about it. Um, Conclusion. What I was saying. The witches to which she obliged to come to her and told her all this information and shown her all these things, um, and put in doubt her belief system. At the end, what she does is what I was saying. She ends up denying it, or like shutting that down, even though she could pick up a necklace coming from nowhere, like right in front of her, you know? So proof that something else was there. or something like that. And there is here something that I wanted to read to you that is something about how she kind of envelops in herself, like in this denial. So the more she spoke, the more she believed what she was saying, the more the elegance of her beliefs seized her, the more she surrounded to their logic, until finally she was weeping and denouncing us, and the darkness within had been denied. She evoked the images of her gods. She evoked her holy language. So it's like this made me think. Of course, I'm not the first one or the first person thinking about this. It, clearly, but this is like when you grow up with something or being taught something or being ritualized in a certain type of behavior or tradition or whatever you may call it, even though you may be forced even to be witness to something that completely puts in question those beliefs, you may come to this, you may be in negation, because it's so overwhelming and so maybe out of your comprehension in terms of what you can take, that you be come to want the comfort of the familiar, of what you know, and come back to your roots, you know what is what was there all along those years that you grew up and were accustomed to. So I'm saying this, I'm not saying that I will be different or anything, but I find this quite interesting. And as you can see, so I made tabs. I hope you are seeing this. I made tabs more at the beginning of the book. Then you have here, I'm going to try and show you. So this chunk of the book, I didn't tab anything unless we are not counting this thing, but that this is for other reasons, not because I found. What I mean is, is that I didn't tab anything, okay, that I thought was relevant to tab. And, so I read all of this, and I can say this is more plotty in terms of storytelling and telling you the story of the characters and how they came to be and so on and so forth, like more of related, witchy, vampirical, and whatever. And so just more here, more towards the end, it's where I came to tab again. And I'm not trying to demerit the book, quite the contrary, because I think this, at least in my opinion, this has a really good combination about entertainment. You have your plot, you have your story you are accompanying of the various characters, but at the same time, as you could see, you have here some bits that you will, if you want to, you can be more reflective and think with the author through her characters. Think about other stuff regarding, of course, if we are talking about vampires, of course we will be, the themes will be surrounding death and being alive, being dead, being mortal, being immortal, and so on and so forth. So that will be an infinite conversation, of course, but that's my thing, I think. At least some of it, um, I I think I'm quite inclined to. And so this story has everything that I was expecting it to be. As I said at the beginning, not in the way that I thought it was going to be, but right now, at the point I'm at, it's being what I thought, what I was expecting, and maybe more even. And because I think Anne Rice, well, if you go search a bit about her personal story, you may, I don't know if that's the reason. I saw some interviews and she somewhat confirms it, uh, and in the interview with the vampire, I don't know if I mention it. Well, what can I say? She had two kids, one boy, one girl, and the girl had, I think it was a cancer. Well, she ended up to pass away when she was only 5 years old, and of course, I can only imagine what Anne Rice went through in that phase of her life. She and her husband, of course, and the brother, of course. So the family got really, well, tough time. And she began writing the Vampire Chronicles, so the first book, The Interview with the Vampire, a bit after the passing of her daughter. And so I think that she was, I'm going to use this word, but I don't want to romanticize it, but she was maybe, at least for some things that I saw, some interviews and so on, tormented a bit about this and the thing of talking about death and religion and so on, because she was born and raised in a very religious family. So they were Christians. I don't know what type of Christians, but um, she ended up to become an atheist or agnostic or somewhat somewhere in between. Then more later in her life, she ends up to come back to religion, to Christianity, and being involved in some organizations. And I think, if I'm not mistaken, that she ends up to get out of that organization and becoming, if not an atheist, somewhat a bit um, disconnected from religion again. So she had a hot and cold relationship with her own beliefs, as maybe every person in this world, or almost everyone. And so I think that I didn't read the whole saga, as you can imagine. I'm only in the third book, I'm I'm supposing those type of experiences permeate her work, right? And I think what we are being presented here is that reflection, the reflection of her own life and her own turmoils with belief and so on and so forth. So that I'm finding quite interesting. And another thing that is talked about in here is a character will be, well, something to do with feminism taken to the extreme. And I'm talking about exterminating all males or everything that is male, basically, or if not all, almost that. Um, and this book is from 88. There's a back and forth between a male and a female about this topic. The female being the what we now can call, if we use the terminology of nowadays, a radical feminist, or somewhat that, and he being, well, I don't know how well to classify him. He's deambling Earth, right? But he's trying to reason with her about this type of thinking and how that would entail, because we are talking about globally, right? And he's kind of having a bit of trouble to argument or counter argument her reasoning, because he, of course, also has not all the answers, or hasn't all the answers. But yeah, I stopped at that chapter. So I'm figuring that, of course, that will be a turn of events in, or eventually, right? So because the protagonist is Lestat. So I'm quite curious to see how the author will turn around this, these ideas that are coming up from this other character, and how will be the reasoning that the author, so Anne Rice, will give for everything that she's twinkling around with the various characters in this book. So yeah, it's quite interesting how you can combine the supernatural and the a mythical being, or whatever you want to call a vampire. Maybe that's supernatural as well. I don't know. With philosophical thoughts and more faith-based and even feminist ideas. So yeah, you have here a bit of everything, So I'm quite enjoying it. And I don't know when I will see you again. I have just this to go to finish. I'm going to read now, so maybe even today I will see you again. Okay, guys, I've been meaning to end up this vlog for quite a while. I wanted it to be more cutesy, but I don't know why I never I never come to be in well put together or in the right time to film. And well, there you go. This is me right now. So yeah, I wanted to talk to you a bit about the Queen of the Damned to end up my thoughts that I talked to you about a bit earlier, a bit for you was like seconds ago. Well, I'm going to do like a continuation of the logical thinking that I was trying to make for you moments before. There's a conversation. I don't know how I put. I don't know how I put it for you guys the last time I talked to you, but there is being here a conversation between Lestat and someone regarding that type of thing that um, that person that is talking to Lestat has an idea to exterminate all males from the world. and and I wanted to read to you some passages that I thought they were quite interesting, that gives us the point of view of that set character that is talking to Lestat or trying to counter argument Lestat, well, Lestat is of the opinion that, well, males shouldn't be simply eradicated from Earth, or at least, as the other character puts it, almost all of them should, as the character says. And that said character goes, "Go out in the lush garden that surrounds this villa, study the bees in their hives and the ants who labor as they have always done. They are female, by the millions. A male is only an aberration and a matter of function. They learned the wise trick a long time before me of limiting the males. Tell me, what is the primary use of men now, if it is not to protect women from other men?" And so they continue to have this debate, you know, of who controls who dominates who endangers who, and so on. And if this plan is or is not a good plan. Lestat, of course, well, you don't know, right? But he remains in his lane, meaning that it's still, with all arguments that this character presents to him, he doesn't agree um, till the end. But he also admits to the reader that he doesn't have the arguments to persuade this said character in terms of how to put it in words that her thoughts are, that this character thoughts are like an aberration. I think that's more or less how he explains it. The main plan that is being constructed here is being or is beginning or his beginning its beginnings is in countries that are what we would consider today underdeveloped, or that are still linked in a lot of superstition. And further on, as you can see, I'm quite at the end of the book. There will be participating here more characters because there comes a point where all culminates in an encounter, well, where all main characters will be together discussing this idea, and there is here a character that will try to persuade the main plotter of this said idea, and he will say something like, "When I knelt at your feet, I begged you for your knowledge, but what I have witnessed in the short span has filled me with awe and love for all things mortal. I have seen revolutions in thought and philosophy which I believed impossible. Is not the human race moving towards the very age of peace you describe?" And he goes on to say, "Look out there at the forest, pick one tree, describe it, if you will, in terms of what it destroys, what it defies, and what it does not accomplish. And you have a monster of greedy roots and irresistible momentum that eats the light of other plants, their nutrients, their air. But that is not the truth of the tree. That is not the whole truth when the thing is seen as part of nature. And by nature, I mean nothing sacred. I mean only the full tapestry. I mean only the larger thing which embraces all." So here is regarding the thing of the argument of the said character saying that men are well, to be at fault for everything that is wrong with the world, and only men are at fault. And this is the counter argument that this, well, not Lestat, so another character brings to the table to try to persuade this character of this extreme idea. And I found this analogy really interesting and brilliant because, how can you, well, it brings you to morality, right? And what is righteous or not, right? And nature, if we think about it, it's really interesting because nature is, well, what is the law of nature? Survive, right? And continue the continuum of the species, or continue the life further, or for further generations, or wherever, or the survival of the self. If we are speaking about the human race, we are trying, I think, to get out of our animalesque. I hope this is a word that exists in English. Animalesque state of mind, and to elevate to a more rational and ethical way of living and way of being in the world. But at the same time, there are primordial and basic states that are connected to our biology, in my perspective, that are difficult to substitute or to get around. We have to eat, we have to breathe. The world, or the human species as a species, It's like that saying, you can't stop evolution. I'm thinking that we are trying to be more or be better, at least some part of the human race. But, well, this would, I think I'm rambling a bit because this would bring up a lot of discussions in regarding the state of our generations in terms comparing generations and the state of, for instance, Gen Z and even millennials, but I'm a millennial. I'm not saying that I'm better or anything, but for various commentaries that we have seen nowadays and in today and age that say that because we exposed children to technology so soon in their development, um, we are seeing that there has been happening a regression in terms of cognitive development. So I have seen some people say that Gen Z is the first generation that is not having scores that are better than the previous generations, meaning their parents. And that some say is the first time that is happening in terms of the human civilization and evolution. And some attribute that to the social media exposure and so on and so forth. But here we are talking about in the 80s. I think that's when this book was written or published at least. So 1988, this book was published. So I think even now, but then, of course, and the author, I suppose, was thinking this that nature is many things, right? But nature is not fair. At least I don't think it is. Fair in the terms that everyone has the same advantages as other live beings. I hope I'm making sense. I'm not. I'm. I thought a bit. I thought a lot about what I was going to say, but now that I'm trying to say it, I don't think it is coming out as I wanted to, and I'm going in a tangent and whatever. But I'm trying to talk about what I think these dialogues are implying, at least for my interpretation, and at the same time bringing it a bit for our day and age and the thoughts that I have reading this. But I thought really interesting coming back to the book. I thought this was really interesting because there is here a continuation of the dialogue that I read to you. No, I think I will read in sequence for you to have a picture of what was being said. So, the character that is plotting against men says, and so you will select now your causes for optimism. Come now, examine for me the western cities where even the poor have given platters of meat and vegetables daily, and tell me hunger is no more. Well, your pupil here has given me enough of that pep already. And so the response is, oh no, not so. Men and women are learning animals. If you do not see what they have learned, you are blind. They are creatures ever changing, ever improving, ever expanding their vision and the capacity of their hearts. You are not fair to them. When you speak of this as the most bloody century, you are not seeing the light that shines ever more radiantly on account of the darkness. You are not seeing the evolution of the human soul. And he continues, true what you say about war. Yes, and the cries of the dying. I too have heard them. We all will we have all heard them through all the decades. And even now the world is shocked by daily reports of armed conflict. But it is the outcry against these horrors which is the light I speak of. It's the attitudes which were never possible in the past. It is the intolerance of thinking men and women in power who, for the first time in history of the human race, truly want to put an end to injustice in all forms. And the said character goes, you speak of the intellectual attitudes of a few, and the other character goes, no, I speak of changing philosophy. I speak of idealism from which true realities will be born. Flawed as they are, he's talking about the humans, so the mortals, they must have time to perfect their own dreams, don't you see? And then it goes on to trying to persuade this character to give time to the mortals to evolve, in terms of civilization and so on, to have the change or some change that this other character says is not seeing in the human civilizations through centuries. Well, this character got through millennials, although, well, I'm not going to say how, but this character that is plotting against men in particular is really old. So, and that is something that they also discuss in here that is almost like, and I suppose this is a bit true, how a person can change, but at the same time, maybe may also be stuck in the same place for a very long time, and even if years pass, if there's not conscious or I don't know, I don't know if I can call innate capacity or um, effort to go to a certain extent or a certain point, um, to try to see the other side or see the other point, or try to undress certain beliefs. So because they um, almost know, they think of this character as being stuck in the past and in the old rituals and in the old traditions and in the old way of thinking, and that they think they along the way you are reading, you get, at least I did, I got the picture that they thought that this character was seeing things the way that this character was, because it was rooted in the past. For all the powers that it had, right? Even so, it was so stuck in the primordial human way of living that that character had, that it there was never an evolution after that, per se. So that character didn't catch on with the times. It wasn't seen beyond her ingrained beliefs, you know? Of course, you can disagree with me. Feel free to say a bit of your mind in the comments. So, the Marius trying to persuade this other character continues. Oh, no, before that. So, the character that I'm trying to talk about is a she, okay? So, she says, I'm eternal and all powerful and shall protect them. And Marius, that is the other character that is trying to persuade her, says, protect them? How can you protect them from their most deadly foes? And she goes, what foes? And Marius responds, disease, death. You are not a healer. Or better, you are no healer. You cannot give life or save it. And they will expect such miracles. All you can do is kill. Silence, stillness. Her face suddenly as lifeless as it had been in the shrine, eyes staring forward, emptiness or deep thought, impossible to distinguish. So, here, of course, enters the mythology of the vampire and so on, and what he can or cannot do. And I think that this character was thinking a bit. Well, you have to really read the book or the trilogy at least to figure out why is that. But you know, this character was habituated to rule, and in the old days, and I think that this stand that she's in is a bit with those eyes. Well, and here I think that she got confronted with her limitations or what she wasn't seeing, because as all powers that she had, she was like almost blind by them, you know, because she thought of herself all powerful, but even she has limitations for the mortals, but she wasn't seeing them. And so, and then further on it continues. History is a litany of injustice, no one denies it. But when has a simple solution ever been anything but evil? Only in complexity do we find answers. Through complexity, men struggle towards fairness. It is slow and clumsy, but is the only way. Simplicity demands too great a sacrifice. It always has. And I found this conclusion is not a conclusion of the scene, of course, but I thought it's a really good conclusion of her fault in her thought. And this applies for many things. The juice for me is this type of thoughts, and I loved it. Yeah. I'm not going to say much more. This one here has had really interesting ideas and discussions as I read to you. So I'm really pleased with me deciding to continue the series. Now, I don't know when I'm going to pick up the next one, so I cannot really say to you. But these videos that or these clips are really, really long. I don't know how I'm going to edit them, but I really have to end this year. So I really advise you, if you don't mind a bit of the vampire mythology or a a version of that said mythology and this type of fantasy, you will be getting a lot of thought. I think, at least I did. And you can go on tangents, and if you have someone to read with or to discuss with, that will be fantastic. So I really advise you to do so. And that's it. I see you next time. Bye bye.